Hi, thank you so much. I am excited to be here with everyone today and share some best practices about becoming what we call a utopian data-driven enterprise and share with you some lessons from some early adopters from predictive intelligence. So as far as the agenda goes today, we're going to start, I'm just going to open up and give you just a few seconds more on my background. And then we'll talk about the changing landscape that we live in today. We live in a world that even a year ago or 2 years ago, we couldn't do the things that we're able to do today. So imagine, I like to actually start with just imagine a world where you know your next customer, who your next customer is, how much they're going to buy, what they're going to buy, when they're going to buy, what messages you should be sending to them with an 85% or greater accuracy rate. Imagine a world when you know before your customers are going to churn that they're about to leave your platforms and solutions. And that's really what this whole concept of predictive intelligence and data-driven world is all about today. So I'm going to share some use cases of data-driven intelligence and some early adopter success and some methodologies, as well as, at the end, we'll open it up to questions. So a little bit of background on myself, just to kind of start. As our announcer mentioned before, I owned a services business for 14 years before starting 6sense. We were a big data predictive intelligence company, basically bringing together multiple channels of online and offline data to drive your business forward. So we were basically closing the loop for predictive for this B2B companies from all of their online digital interactions to their offline interactions. About 5 years ago, we had an idea, Cisco's been a customer for 10 years, that we could take this data and instead of just looking backward on the data, could we use it to actually find future sales? So we were able to have some incredible success, and I'm going to share that later today, and talk about some other future moving forward technologies and ways and applications of data. We have since raised $12 million from Battery and Venrock, and we are what we believe is the most forward-leaning predictive intelligence solution on the market for B2B enterprise companies. Kind of going back to the core of the presentation here. So what is a utopian data enterprise? I like to think of the idea of a utopian data enterprise is kind of taking a step backward. We live in a world where we're all familiar with CRM solutions and solutions like Salesforce and Workday and process-driven software. We now can live in a world where we can actually take humans out of the equation and think about a world where actually our data drives our businesses forward. So imagine when you're creating that business case where you're trying to justify an expense of efficiencies. And that's the world we used to live in. We now live in a world where we actually can use the data and we can take humans out of the equation and drive our business and our goals forward and allow us to really be more sitting on the sidelines and empowering these solutions for our next best interaction with our customers. So we're going to take a quick poll of the audience. Expect 3 questions to come through shortly. And you should all be seeing the first question. How would you categorize your company? Just so we understand what the bulk of the audience is today. Take a minute to answer those. Great. It looks like we've got a majority of both B2B and B2C on the line today. So our second question is, what department within your organization are you in? Or what's the closest you can get to? All right, it sounds like we've got a majority of IT folks on the line today, followed by strategy other. And last question, just to get us warmed up here. What's your experience and knowledge of predictive intelligence?
Great. So it sounds like a lot of folks on the line today don't know too much about predictive intelligence, so you're on the right webinar. That's what we're going to be talking about. Thanks so much for taking those. There'll be 2 more questions throughout the rest of the survey. And we'll be back to the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Meryl. So let's just start kicking off. Let's go back a step in our history and our evolution as humans. I like to think about this. Let's just simplify and dumb this down. We used to live in a world, we lived in the Ice Age, and then we moved to the Industrial Age. And everybody knows now, kind of thinking of the world we live in, of being in this, what we call an information age. So what is an information age? Information age is where actually humans are going and searching for content. And all of a sudden, everything we could possibly ever want to know is at our fingertips. We can Google it, we can go to Wikipedia, and we can get any bit of information. We can learn anything we want to learn with a matter of a few clicks. But what does that do for us? That allows us to go in and actually consume that information as humans. But it still makes us have to actually interact with that information, right? So you still have to decide, okay, I have this wealth of information. Now what am I going to do with it to change my life or change my business or change my process? The world of the data-driven age is really a world where, imagine we take humans out. And imagine you say, I want this end goal. And you click a button and that end goal happens, where the data actually tells you what your next right move is. So in the information age, we had to consume information and we have to interpret information. It requires a high level of complexity and subjectivity on top of that information. And in the data-driven age, this really is a world. We're moving into this world and we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what we're about to see. But where data and everything that we have can actually drive all of our businesses and processes forward. So imagine a world where, as I mentioned before, you can predict when your customers are going to churn. Imagine a world where you know exactly what campaign is going to drive your audience to the next level of interaction in your marketing channels and have the greatest success of actually converting them to a customer, or knowing what message is going to resonate best with them. Imagine a world where you know which of your customers are your next best customer. Imagine that you know when you pick up a phone, you know with an 80% chance that person or individual or company is highly likely to buy your products. So this is the world that we're moving to, is taking all of this data and really allowing your data to drive your business processes forward.
So we've got one more poll question now that we've started diving into the subject matter a little bit more. So take a look at the slide that just popped up. So how are you using or planning on using predictive in any way, shape, or form in your organization this year? We're keen on hearing from you. So great. It sounds like most of you all are considering predictive to find new prospects in the market to buy products or services. Great insight.
Which is great. We think that finding new prospects, we see a lot of companies today talking about predictive in terms of lead scoring and predictive intelligence there, but there's so much more that you can do with the business today, going far beyond just scoring existing leads and contacts that are coming through. We polled some of the leading analysts out there, and we looked at some secondary research. GigaOM is talking about, well, why are people not actually using data and using predictive? And they said that they need to find a way to make it easy and consumable. We get all this data together. We're all talking about, years ago how the new technology advances with Hadoop and all of the big data technologies we have. But how is that really driving our business forward? The Wall Street Journal says, why aren't people looking at big data? It's that they don't know what the business case is. And The Economist says, similar to the survey question we just asked, what's the most valuable use for big data? It's for business forecasting. But the key in extracting all this data, so tying all the data together, a lot of companies, and I'd imagine a lot of you, it sounds like from the polling question, a lot of you are IT related. And in the IT departments, I think we're typically focused on how can we pull this data together, how can we tie it together, make it real time, process it, analyze it, store the data, tie together these multiple channels of data, which is what I was doing in my past life for so very long, is pulling together the online, the offline, and all of our different silos of data to kind of completing that picture. But the challenge then is once you do that, how do you then extract value? The Economist says that it takes 77% of people who are doing this, and these IT departments who are bringing all this data together, that they're taking years to move from adoption to return. Right? It's not happening overnight. So you get all the data together and then trying to figure out what that business case is. And in the enterprise world, 76% of marketers are unable to convert what we call that behavioral data into segmentation and even analysis. And I think of segmentation, targeting, personalization, analysis as kind of more in what we were calling the information age. It's really you get this information and then the business decides what to do with it. We know that a certain particular audience belongs in this segment. They're this industry, this vertical, this size of company. They're likely to buy these particular products. Now I want to go forward and give them this campaign and put them into this journey, if you will, for marketing automation. The truth is that's still forcing a human to kind of come in and have that interpretation, and we're still not even there yet. So I'd say we still have not capitalized on the full value of what the information age has to offer, let alone the data-driven age. And of those who are using behavioral data, the 24%, less than 20% have the technology, the creative execution, and the integration to really deliver that target experience. They're doing it kind of in one-off frameworks. I like to think of it, most of the customers and companies we work with, they have one-off set projects, campaigns, specific things that they're doing, and then executing, but it's not a continuous process, and it's not continuous learning. So how do we move to that age? I just love this graphic. So what good is knowledge, the information age, and having all these segments and having all the data connected if we're not taking action on it? And this is, an obvious one. Our world is getting bigger and bigger, especially when it comes to big data, vendors, and applications. And I think of predictive as this layer that sits on top of all of these different applications and landscape of big data. So you have the infrastructure where you're tying the data together. You have the analytics, and then you have the applications. And predictive sits on top of all that to tie all these things together to really drive your business forward. So in a nutshell, what is predictive? So I think of predictive as, there's two camps. There's historical data of business intelligence data. Business intelligence data are those deep dive analytics and reportings. And maybe you're going to see an 80% increase in quantifiable ROI from looking backward on that data. Predictive is really telling you what's going to happen next or where you should be focusing your efforts. And, we've seen as high, this slide says 250%. I actually just had a customer that had a 450x lift over what they were doing, looking and using predictive technologies. So instead of just spraying and praying, which is what marketing is doing today, especially in the enterprise world, think about using predictive to really get very focused in on knowing exactly who will respond to what message, what channel, how we should reach them. If you're not familiar with inside sales and some of the things they're doing in terms of, trying to know what that right next call center is and that message that you should be responding to, there's some really advanced techniques of using predictive at every stage of the marketing cycle. I'm going to pause for a moment. We have another poll. Oh, sorry, we took the other polls. Just kidding. So I also think, going backward, let's look backward at data. And reporting, I lived in a world where, we would create these reports, these online to offline reports. So we would look at, thousands of interactions that are happening and multiple millions of dollars spent on campaigns. And the reporting was really backward looking. And to be honest, it was justifying and being used as subjective criteria to continue to allow those people who had the biggest voice in the room, who decided that we're going to spend on this is how we're going to reach them. And it would help them create that validation for what they're doing. It wasn't giving them insight of what they should be doing different or what's really not working. So when you allow subjectivity to sit on top of data, you instantly are creating a bias that you're not actually driving and doing what's actually best and right for your business. The world of predictive is really to think about the data and say, let's take those humans out and let's let the data tell us what the next interaction is going to be.
We have a gigantic database full of customer behavior information.
Excellent. We can use nonlinear math and data mining technology to optimize our retail channels.
If that's the same thing as spam, we're having a good meeting here.
So I thought we'd just put a little funny in. The truth is, we think about what we're doing. The point of this cartoon is to say, a lot of people are thinking about this idea of predictive, and they really don't get it, and really think that this is kind of a better way of spamming. But if you think of spam as talking to somebody and giving us the message when we actually have a need, I think back to when I was getting ready to purchase a CRM solution for our company. There was one point in time when I was ready for that purchase. There was 6 months before I was launching a company. I'm now on to many other things. But there was that one point when I actually was looking at what does RelateIQ have to offer? What does NetSuite have to offer? What does Salesforce have to offer? And when those inbound messages were coming in, I was reading them. I was responding to them. I was actually engaging with the inside sales people that were contacting me. So I like to think about this as if you can find that buyer at that pivotal point in time when they have a need, that's when you're actually going to be the most effective. My next slide is, I like to think of this as the turkey analogy. We're getting close to Thanksgiving here, so I thought this would be interesting. And this is kind of going to the same point of looking at reporting. If you look at the reporting of the turkey's weight over time, and the turkey thinks, I'm continuing to grow. I'm growing. I have no reason to think that anything's going to change. I'm just going to get bigger, fatter, and happier over time. Well, if you don't have a dependent variable to look at your past data, predictive would tell you if you took all the turkeys in the past and you put it up against a dependent variable, that come November, that turkey, if not November, definitely December, that turkey is not going to be around anymore. This is the same kind of case when we think about using the applications of reporting versus predictive. So predictive would tell us things that intuition doesn't always have right. So some early adopters and some examples. So enough of the high-level stuff. Let's get into kind of the meat of what you can do and what success looks like. So I'm going to skip this slide. This slide really just talks about the effectiveness and productivity and profitability of those using big data. I actually think this is way underestimating the value that you would see when you start using predictive. And the reason it's underestimating, 5 to 6% increase compared to their peers, is because they're just not, companies today have not even begun, like I said before, to really take advantage of what predictive can do for them. We're seeing actually some enterprises that have, and we're actually seeing a 10x increase in some of their sales and conversions and moving the markets into the right areas at the right time. We have one example we know of, a company that's using predictive, that they were able to find one of their largest customers. So imagine using data and knowing and looking at the world of the behavioral intent data and finding a customer that you never would have called on before. So Exactly Software sells sales compensation software, and using predictive intelligence, we're able to find one of their largest deals in their history of their business by using this. And so when you think about the ROI for predictive, in a very simple example like this, where Exactly Software, they have a reasonably small market of their addressable market of those people who are looking for sales compensation software, if they can find one customer as a result of this, it's 10x, if not greater, the return on what they're paying for that predictive solution. I challenge our customers, if we find just one deal, to turn us off, right? So it better not be one, and you should really exponentially be looking at the incremental value to your business. These are just some other early adopters we know of predictive. Now I'm going to kind of talk about a very specific use case and case study, and this is kind of the evolution of where 6th Sense actually came from. So as I mentioned before, I owned a services business, and Cisco was a customer for 10 years. We were basically doing their online to offline cross-channel analytics, helping them connect all of their digital worlds and their Salesforce data to what was happening offline in their bookings data to see what was working. We had an idea, we had a hypothesis 5 years ago. We said, this is great that we're looking back on all this data, but how can we use this data to drive our business forward? Can we actually look at the past purchase patterns of those companies who do buy? And then when other companies come in and exhibit the same behavior, can we predict that they too will buy? The challenge, however, is that 60 to 90% of buyers are making their purchase decision before they get into their CRM and marketing automation. So the challenge and what most lead scoring companies and those people who are talking about predictive today are doing is they're taking, if you think about the funnel, that bottom of the funnel, and they're helping you sort and prioritize what you already know. But the problem with that is they're missing the opportunity of all of those other companies and individuals that have buying intent that haven't made it into your systems. So the real fundamental thesis that we were trying to solve at Cisco was, can we find those buyers before they raise their hand, before they download that white paper, before they get into your marketing automation system? So they sought to find buyers at every stage of the sales cycle. So it's not just contacts. Cisco is a B2B company. And, this is one of those days I spent my whole life, looking at software technologies that were built for B2C and tried to morph into, okay, now how are we going to apply this to B2B? Where, and they always break. And the reason they always break is the fundamental end-to-end process of B2B is just completely different than B2C. So if you build a B2C solution and try to apply it to B2B, you're going to have a hard time. And one of the core principles that those B2B solutions are kind of built around is around an individual. They're built around one person. So think of the example of myself buying shoes. I have a nasty shopping problem. I'm an avid, admitted, shopaholic. I love to shop, and even when I'm on conference calls, I might be finding myself on, Ferragamo and other places where I'm looking at different shoes and different stuff. Now, those other sites like Amazon and Zappos and those people who sell those similar shoes, they know that I'm doing that, right? And we all know that they're able to target me with those messages to give me that message of, hey, are you interested in this shoe? We saw you looking for this. And then, even if I'm looking for shoes, they might think I also need handbags. So that's where they're doing some basic, what we call correlation type of analysis. But the truth is, they really don't know that I'm going to buy it. They know I may have an interest. The beauty with B2B companies is actually you can get so much deeper, because imagine that there is exponentially more data available when somebody's going to purchase a multi-million-dollar new networking system, and they need routers and they need switches and they need all of this other information. The footprint they're leaving behind versus the footprint that a B2C is leaving behind is exponentially greater, meaning the math team has far more data to make this prediction. So, we really thought about this, and the truth is 90% of those interactions are anonymous. So how do you take that anonymous data, tie it back to a company, know that company is getting ready to buy, and then make company predictions and individual predictions? So it's not just about that one person, but it's about stringing together the activity of all the people across multiple channels and tying it back to a company and a contact. So what we do, at Cisco, when we did this first case study, this was actually several years ago now, we took 400,000 companies that purchased over the course of 2 years. And we said, great, what did they do? What did they do across all of Cisco's digital channels? And now today, which we didn't do then, but now today we're taking and looking at the whole, what we call the B2B web, of all of the interactions that are happening across publishers and blogs and forums and different channels of data, plus what happens in the call center, plus what happens when they talk to somebody from click to chat, in addition to what happens in your Salesforce data and the interactions they have. And we said, what does it take to lead up to a purchase? Let's look at those patterns. Is there a pattern across multiple companies in certain verticals and certain industries when they're buying specific products, where when somebody else comes in and matches that same pattern, can we make a prediction? So what we did is we looked for, and this is just the simplicity of what the math is doing. So we used machine learning techniques, and we were looking for these patterns of behavior, and then these patterns would allow us to make predictions. And we would predict, for example, PG&E is 80% likely to buy $5 million of routers in the next 6 months. So we're predicting the percent likelihood, so that's our confidence in the prediction. We're predicting how much they're going to buy, what products they're going to buy, the time they're going to buy it, and one other thing that's not on this slide is predicting where they are in the sales cycle. This is an example of, when we first started this project and we had the results back, we started to see thousands and thousands of these results. And the line, the bright blue line that has the spikes, that's our prediction. Those are the machine learning models that are coming up with the score of our prediction. And the bars are the actual bookings that happen. So this is one company at Cisco that was getting ready to buy routers. And you can see that there's a relationship. If you just look at this, take a step back and look at it, you can see when there's a spike, 2 months later, there's a booking. And then there's another spike, and then 2 months later, there's another booking. And actually what you notice here is that the time window between the time of the spike and the booking is the same. And what we started to see over and over and over again was for each specific company, now not each of our customers, but for every company that was getting ready, every prospect that was getting ready to buy from Cisco, there was this relationship of the spike to the booking, which told us, and we went back and the math team went back and validated there actually is a strong relationship between that. And what that relationship told us is that, we know in the enterprise world, when you're selling to an SMB, your sales cycle might be 2 months. When you're selling to an enterprise company, your sales cycle might be 12 months or 24 months. So if you apply the same principles and the same math to everyone, you're always going to get your big companies coming to the top. But when you start to apply these principles at the level of each company compared to themselves, you can actually make the prediction that this SMB company is getting ready to buy $1,000 and this enterprise company is getting ready to buy $5 million. Now, we looked at thousands and thousands of these, and then their database marketing team actually spent several months validating our results, and they came back, and I'll show you some of those results in a moment, talking about what they were able to come back and show this relationship actually was there, and it was strongly predictive. So imagine that now we have this spike. How are you going to use this data? We initially built and set off this project with the web marketing team within Cisco. The fundamental core business behind and the practice behind this was to help do better personalization and better targeting when somebody comes to Cisco.com. Meaning, if we know somebody's highly likely to buy routers and they're from an enterprise company, we're going to give them a completely different experience than that SMB company that's in the early awareness stage of buying switches, right? So Cisco had 550,000 plus pages, and they were trying to figure out how do we get people to the right content and helping them find the path that's right for them. And when we started to see increase of 5 to 20x increase in conversions, it became really clear that we were onto something. And then that's when we started to say, well, maybe this could be used for demand generation. If we really know these companies are going to buy, and then demand generation passed those leads off to sales, and then sales thought, well, maybe we can give these off to partners and resellers. So now all of our results are kind of touching every downstream system within Cisco. So when it comes to sales and marketing, these results are going out to all the different facets, from a personalization and targeting perspective, demand generation perspective, a sales perspective. There's even been talks of how they can use this data to help forecast their business. So there are applications far beyond sales and marketing where this data can really apply and change the business. I like to think too that marketing is driving so much data. They're spending so much money on awareness and on consideration ads and trying to get people into that purchase cycle and demand generation. But all they've ever been able to do up until today is report on that data. Right, to say, this is what I've done. Imagine where marketing can use that data to tell Cisco what markets and what verticals and what products and what industries they should be getting into. So, they're really sitting on a gold mine, I like to say, of data. And if we can really start to harness that data and understand the meaning and take the complexity out and make it very simple, that we can really drive our businesses forward. These are just some other examples of the spikes in the bookings across multiple different customers. So I'm just going to flip through them fast. But what you'll notice is that there's a different pattern happening, for every particular company. This is an example that looks very cluttered when you first look at it, but each line represents a different product line. So imagine, too, that we started to say, okay, it's great to know they're going to buy, but we want to know what they're going to buy. And in this example, you can see we've made predictions at different product categories that they would buy server, software, solutions, and networking. This actually wasn't Cisco's, another company. And we were basically able to predict exactly what product they were going to buy. And then so you can see here, we were able to predict, I can't even read the slides, it's so small here, but I think it's $48,000 worth of bookings of those particular products. Again, this is an SMB company. We see multiple spikes before that prediction was getting ready to happen. So just a couple others just to kind of show you how it works. These are some very specific examples of actual dollar amount predictions we made. Now, obviously, I can't share all of them. But, the first one here, we predicted 200,000. They bought 211,000. We predicted 900,000. They ended up buying 1.3 million. And where the real value is on this slide is thinking of the lost opportunities. So imagine the two in the middle there that say they're lost. Those aren't opportunities that weren't in market to buy. They were in market to buy routers and switches, but they actually went to a competitor. And Cisco's sales reps and partners didn't know that this company was likely to buy these products, so they completely missed that opportunity. So in addition to getting in front of that opportunity ahead of time, you can also use this data to find those companies that you don't even know that are going to your competitors. I mean, we look at it today, doing it on our own business, to find out who's looking at predictive intelligence, who's looking at really trying to use data to drive marketing and sales. And those are the companies we're going to go prospect and spend our time. We're a small marketing and sales team, and we have to be very efficient about the world is our oyster because we really do believe everybody has a need for this. But we have to be very specific about, okay, if we're going to pick up the phone and make calls today, I have, just 2 salespeople that, inside sales that are making those calls, and who are they supposed to be making those calls to? And it's the same thing. Where should you really operationally, efficiently be spending your time? And we think you should spend that time on those companies that are most likely to purchase. This is just kind of a deep dive into why we're not really showing the details here, but the idea is that once you come up with these predictions too, you really need to give back your sales reps and marketing information to be as actionable as possible, so they can have a relevant talking, experience with that prospect. So if I were to give this data to a salesperson, I'm telling them exactly the indicators and the things, the actions and the activity that this particular individual had that led to that prediction. So when they call, they can, they wouldn't say this directly, but they would say, I know what you did, I know what everyone else from your company did, I know what products you have an affinity towards, and so I think, Mr. Customer, you're going to respond to this message. So this next slide here is just to talk about some of the validation that Cisco did when we first started this project. Basically came back and said there were 4 possible scenarios. Their database marketing team took this data, went away and said, okay, Amanda, did this spike actually predict the booking? The far left example is where there's no spike and no booking. Well, we got it right there because we didn't say that anything was going to happen and nothing happened. Then the next scenario is when there was a spike, was there a booking or was there an opportunity, better yet. The one on the bottom left, if there's a spike but there's no booking, so that could be when they went to a competitor, right? So we wanted to call those down and see, did they actually have a need and we weren't actually marketing and selling to them. And then the last scenario on the far right-hand corner, this would be where we missed the mark, where we would simply say, we didn't show that there was no spike, there was no prediction, and then there ended up being a booking. And what Cisco came back with was, this is their database marketing team, that 85% of the time, companies with a minimum score of 50 and a spike of 10x or greater, which is basically our machine learning, the math coming back and coming up these scores, if you will, that 85% of those that have that minimum score and have that spike are going to book 5x or greater their average booking size. And 27% are going to book 50x or greater their average booking size. So imagine knowing which companies are going to have those exponentially large bookings. This is just a quote from Cisco's SVP of demand generation, talking about the different ways that they tested the models and all the increases on the click-throughs. Some other results we had an inside sales team where they were qualifying $1 million of opportunities a week, and after using some predictive technologies, they were able to qualify $2.8 million, all the way up to the bottom one in one calendar year, $300 million of net new business. This same company has us on the hook this year for a little over $1 billion. So some of the methodologies, so let's go into kind of the techniques. One of my favorite things to say is that people say, is this really possible? Is this really doable? And, I go back to that Amazon example, and I go back to saying, do you think that Amazon knows when you're ready to buy a baby crib? Yeah. So why can't a B2B company know when you're going to get ready to buy routers? And it's as simple as saying, it's not magic, it's math. And I like to say a whole ton of intent data, right? So it's a combination of using the technologies and tools that we have today, using the world of big data and Hadoop, of machine learning and mathematical techniques to be able to pull all these multiple channels of data together to make these predictions. So what's changed in our world? The first thing that's changed is we now are sitting on a pile, or is exponentially, we all know this, and there's 1,000 different statistics about the mass quantities of data that's being produced a year. So a 40% growth rate is daunting when you start thinking about, well, shucks, what am I going to do with this data? I have so much more data than I've had in the past. And that's where you really need to take these techniques, and whether it be your internal team or external vendors. And I'd say the mantra should be taking complexity and the mass volumes of this data and making it simple. So how do you take complexity and make it simple to drive your business forward? I like to think, too, the data holds the key, right? So on top of it all, the data, people are leaving behind what we call this digital footprint everywhere they're going. So we now have the ability to see this data, and we see who those people are, and we know exactly what they're doing across your channels and external channels. And you just need to hone in on that and make it very simple to understand what products and what technologies individuals and companies are getting ready to buy. So we're sitting on a pile of untapped data, a gold mine, if you will, to truly measurably grow your business.
So we're going to push another poll question to the audience. Thanks for sticking with us so far. Take a look at the question that just popped up. Now that we've gone through a little bit of predictive over the course of this webinar, what data do you think is most predictive to find new customers? And we've given you 2 options to choose from there. Interested in seeing your thoughts. We'll take another 10 or so seconds to let you answer that.
Okay, great. You guys all got it right, which I'm glad to see you guys are still with us. I like to try to keep these things a little bit interactive. I get tired of hearing myself talk. So there are two types of data. Pretty much everyone kind of leans towards intent data. And, you probably got part of that maybe from my talk today, but hopefully, it's obvious, it's intuitive, right? That if I can look at attributes about a company and I can look at attributes about a contact, and I can say this industry, this role, this decision maker, that's all descriptive data. What that does for us is that tells us that this is what we call the ideal buyer profile. Every lead scoring company on the market today focuses on, and aside, we don't consider ourselves a lead scoring company, focuses on what we call static descriptive data. They're either crawling the web for that data, they're crawling job postings, they're calling financial reviews, they're buying the data from many different sources, right? So all of our traditional, we know all these contact data providers, we know all these company data providers. So they're tying all that data together, and they're saying that you get your leads, and they're basically saying, does this match the buyer that you've sold to before? Are they the same industry, role, vertical? Are they growing? They're looking for, one of the case studies that everybody always talks about, this company is growing, and they use, or if you're a SaaS company, they've used SaaS products with, they're more likely to be a company that's inclined to buy SaaS products. That's all great. It says that this is the ideal buyer profile, which is what I consider table stakes. It's kind of the starting point to say, okay, should we be having a conversation with this company? What that doesn't tell us is that company is in market to buy your products now. The only thing that can tell you that company is in market to buy your products now, when you're looking at math and trying to push this all together, is behavioral intent data. And where do you get behavioral intent data? One is you're sitting on a ton of the data yourself when people come to your digital properties, when you place ads and do media campaigns, you actually are seeing who's viewing those ads. You can see who clicks on those ads. You can see who's coming into your site. And then there's a whole wealth of third-party data. When you think about when people are, especially in the B2B world, they're going to blogs and communities and forums and B2B publishers and objective sources to try to look at the competitive differentiators of products, and they're doing their research. When they're searching, so they're searching for particular keywords, that's all intent data. So when I search for 8,600 routers, of course that's going to be more predictive than knowing that I'm an SMB, startup company, right? So when we think about making the predictions and thinking about taking that mass quantity of data, you really want to really pull back in on all this intent data. And the intent data is what's really driving the true value of these predictions. So these are just a couple examples. I know I'm running close on time here, so this is an example of a company that sells laptops. And across what we call the B2B web, we see 6 million intent indicators of companies and individuals that are looking to buy laptops. So those intents, we're trying to figure out who are those companies and who are those individuals so this particular company can go market and sell to those companies. Actually, I read an article this morning, I don't know if you guys saw the article from Facebook, but Facebook is about to do multiple device tracking, right? So no longer relying on cookies. If you have follow-up questions, I can talk to you about some of the techniques and being able to do this, which is really, really amazing. We live in a completely different world today, and I think people don't even understand the complexity of what we can do and how well we can get down to particular individuals, but connecting multiple devices like your phone and your iPad to your computer, and then back to a company. Taking all of the anonymous activity. When I don't register and I don't go through the gated content, can I tie that data back to that individual and that person? And then taking the anonymous and the known and tying it to a company, which, to be honest, in the B2B world, this is where the magic starts to happen. It's because you have exponentially more data. And then from there, connecting first and third-party data. So I won't talk about this, but being able to do techniques where we're looking at an individual in your channel and finding that individual's activity in third-party channels and making those connections. Creating structure from unstructured. We just got announced as a partner of IBM Watson. And so, IBM Watson, as those of you who know, are creating structure from unstructured, taking the corpus of this unstructured data and being able to pull structure back and make sense of it. So, for example, in this page here, is this page about boxing and moving boxes when I see the word box, or is it about cloud computing boxes? So, there are this interpretation that this layer, this is unstructured to structured, that we're trying to make sense of. And so just some of the quick use cases, I like to think that lead scoring, as I mentioned before, is the tip of the iceberg, and to be honest, might slightly move your needle by a few percentage points, but is not going to be game-changing. you really should be thinking about predictive, especially for sales and marketing applications across all of your marketing, your downstream sales and marketing channels. So how can you use this to better serve ads? How can you use this to, instead of just spraying and praying for awareness, let's go into those companies who are actually starting that process and might have a need in buying your products if you're trying to get that message out early. And then those companies that are highly likely to buy, those are the ones you need to pick up the phone and call. So it's thinking about doing personalization and targeting and optimization across your entire sales and marketing suite, not just going into marketing automation and CRM. So some of the use cases and the needs is to do better targeting and optimization. If you have a volume of leads problem, if you're not finding the right people, so you have leads coming in, but it's just the volumes aren't high enough for sales, or if you have a quality problem, and I think most people that we talk to, especially in the enterprise world, they don't have a volume problem. They're getting the names, they're getting the leads, but they don't know which ones to call. And they get 300,000 leads come in a month. Inside sales can call on 2,000. Which 2,000 should they be calling on? And then a measurability problem, like really tying all of the efforts that you do from a marketing perspective in your early stages, so all the awareness side, all the way through to that offline conversion. So using predictive to do that as well. So there's just another slide that talks about that too, but also all the account-based marketing techniques. So if you know these accounts are highly likely to buy, instead of just going after what we call an arbitrary top, our global 1,000, how many enterprise companies have their target account list that are, their global 1,000 or global 5,000, and they're just going to go after those. Those companies may have absolutely no need to buy your products or are completely delighted and happy with your customers, your competitors. So why are you going to spend your efforts on those companies? Why not spend your efforts on somebody that's further down the line but highly likely to buy and may even spend more money because they have a greater need? That basically concludes our webinar. Hopefully I gave you kind of a flavor of what predictive intelligence can do to your organization. And I know I talked a lot about sales and marketing applications, but there are so many other applications when it comes to forecast planning, territory planning, companies like Gainsight and predicting churn. Predictive is just, we're just beginning to scratch the surface and thinking about what it can do for our business. And I think the beauty is that marketing is actually sitting on a lot of this data. And my vision and kind of dream one day is that there'll be a day where actually marketing or sales reports to marketing versus marketing reporting to sales. Because if they can really start to hone in and understand those buyers based on their interactions, marketing is going to be holding the keys at the end of the day. So thank you, everyone. That concludes, and I am all set.
We're going to be opening it now up for questions. We've got a couple of great questions that came through, so we'll address some of those right now. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. And just a reminder, you can reach us at www.6, that's the number 6sense.com. So one of the questions that came through that I thought was the most interesting is, Amanda, during that conference, were you looking at shoes? Were you buying shoes online?
While I was doing the webinar?
Yes.
I was not, but I wouldn't put it past me.
Thank you, Rohit, for that question. But in all honesty, Rohit had another great question. He asked, wouldn't removing subjectivity from your predictive exercise make it seem like finding a needle in a haystack?
It's exactly what it's doing, right? So when you remove subjectivity, and you actually let your data tell you who your next customers are. I'll never forget, there was a day when we delivered these results to Cisco. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. So if you've ever heard me talk before, you've probably heard this one. But we had a VP that was sitting across the table from me, and she said, Amanda, do you know what you're doing? And I said, yeah, I'm predicting your sales. And she said, no, you actually know our customers are going to buy before they know they're going to buy. And then the conversation went to, oh, let's give them POs, and everybody was laughing. But the truth is, if you know these companies have a need before they know they have a need, imagine what it can do to your business in getting in front of those opportunities. So absolutely, there is a haystack of opportunities out there. You just need to know which one is the needle, which one is that one that is most likely to convert.
Great. David A. had a question. What sort of success rate is necessary to make this worthwhile?
I mean, so just like the exactly example, if one big deal closes, right? So if you're an enterprise company and you find one new opportunity that closes, it pays for itself. But, I tell our customers, if you're not getting exponentially higher, 2, 3, 5, 10x higher conversions, then turn us off. I would expect, unless your market is so small, now there are companies that we've talked to, so some SMB companies and other markets that are, maybe there's 500 companies that they would ever sell to. That's not the right use case for this, right? So, It's for companies that have broad markets, that have products that have a highly decisioned, considered purchase, where people are actually leaving behind that trace. If there's no trace and it's an impulse buy, this isn't something that this technique specifically isn't going to work for you. Now, there are B2C type of techniques that do correlation and things like that, but the techniques that I mainly focus on today are really about looking at that high considered purchase. And when you think about the SMB market, you're getting into the SMB or mid-market, selling to SMBs and mid-markets, there are hundreds of millions of companies. Which ones should you focus on?
Great. Matthew had a question, Matthew Quint. Is this all based on the prospect's history with the client? If not, how are we collecting this data on potential prospects?
Great question. So yes, we do use historical data to help us set what we call that dependent variable to make the prediction. If you have 1,000 bookings or 1,000 conversions, that's typically enough. So that's kind of, my math team probably would shoot me for using such a generic number like that. But the truth is, if we have enough volume where you've had some conversions before, what we're trying to understand is what are those patterns leading up to those purchases. And then we can go out and look at everybody out there, right? So then look at everybody else's activity. The primary data sources that we're using, so in some cases like a Cisco or a Dell or other companies, NetApp, VMware companies that we work with, that they have a lot of conversion data and have a lot of digital interaction data. There's going to be a goldmine of value in their own data. There are other companies like XACTLY and Blue Jeans and other companies we work with who don't have as much data because they don't have as much market share. So we're not going to find as much value in their data. And that's where combining our customers' data with third-party data, so what we call the B2B web, where we have relationships to pick up from thousands of B2B publishers, blogs, communities, forums, search data, tying that activity together with our customers' data is where we're able to find these predictions for these earlier stage companies that may not have the wealth of transactional and historical digital footprint that a company like Cisco would have.
Earl Mitchell, you had a question that I think I can answer. Can we get a copy of your slides? We are happy to hand out select slides. Feel free to reach me at Meryl, MERYL, at 6sense, that's the number 6, SENSE.com, and I'll send them over. So David had a question, and this was more of a recap question. Can you recap what the key lessons are for predictive intelligence, what the key lessons being learned or in the industry are?
I think the key lessons, first understand what your end objective is. Right? So what are you trying to predict for, right? So instead of just building this big data Hadoop store, what are you going to do with it, right? So which pieces of your organization, is it marketing, is it sales, and then what is that business objective? And then from there, really, it depends if you're a B2C or a B2B company, and if you're a B2B company, kind of fundamentally thinking about your business in terms of companies, and you're going to get exponentially more data there. And then the other key, I think the key insight is focusing not on the static attribute data, but in not crawling for a bunch of this data. We do that as well because there is some value there, but really the gold mine is thinking about your behavioral data. So really trying to make sense of the intent data that you're sitting on.
Great. David A. had a question that was a little bit more theoretical, and I think this goes back to the data sources again. Why do you think all of those things you want to know are actually knowable? We're actually capable of knowing them, finding them out?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I think what you're asking is why do we think that those indicators are there? I mean, it goes back to it's math, right? So the math is telling us that they're confident that this indicator and this pattern of behavior is going to lead to a sale, that this is the pattern that somebody would take prior to buying. And it's not one, a lot of people ask me, another follow-up question to that would be, well, what is it? Is it these downloads? Is it white papers? Is it watching videos? Is it going blogging? Is it what are the interactions that are most predictive? And that question itself is kind of fundamentally wrong in the sense that there is no one activity. It's the combination of these activities in the order that they happen and across the multiple channels that they happen that lead us to the predictions. So there is no one magic bullet, right? So it's not just looking for an increase in visitors by company. It's not just looking for people doing certain things. It's looking at the relativity of each of those companies and allowing the map to figure it out. So we're using, multiple machine learning techniques where we're using a string of different mathematical, pretty much all that are out there, to figure out what math fits the problem for each particular company. So you can't really do a black box way of doing this where you're going to say, I'm going to take one set of math and apply it to every single company. It just won't work like that. So, we are still very strongly founded in the belief that we need to do some customization for every endpoint that we're predicting for every customer to make this work.
Great. And a little bit more on what you just spoke about, Amanda. Ruben's wanting to know more about the math, which kinds of math algorithms we're using, and more about the math behind the magic.
Yeah, so we're using everything from linear regression, we're using neural networks, we're using decision trees. It's a combination, like I said, of everything that's out there, and applying these different formulas. We have a way to kind of create all the data and create the features that go into these different mathematical methods. And then we look at those, and then we ensemble them. So ensembling is bringing together multiple techniques of math to, and one of the main ways that we do this ensemble is we look at what we call the DNA score. So that means it's your buyer profile score, which is based on mostly that attribute data, to say, okay, let's put that in. There's math that works well for that. And then the math that's going to work really well for the time-based activity data is very different, but we're going to tie those two types together to come up with the final score. So we'll be asking ourselves the question, do they meet the right buyer profile, and do they have intent? And so there's different math that answers both of those questions, and we're tying them together. I like thinking of it analogous to predicting the weather. So if you know about how weather predictions are made, they typically, let's say they have 10 models that are running to predict the weather, and 8 of 10 of them say it's going to rain. They say it's 80% likely to rain. It's kind of a similar concept, that we think is really important to making this work.
Fabulous. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, if you have any follow-up questions or want a deeper dive into any of this material, you can reach us at www.sixthsense.com or reach out directly. That's Meryl, MERYL, at sixthsense.com. We'd be happy to answer more of your